Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 249th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will engage in what we call Panel's Choice, where each panelist selects a topic of their choice and invites the other fellow panelists to chime in. Our first panelist is Susan Hanlon, current member of the Wadsworth City Council and retired Dean of the College of Business at the University of Akron. Then Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council and retired math teacher at Wadsworth Senior High. And that's it. Our other two panelists could not make it today, so we're going to charge ahead without them. Susan, go ahead. What is on your mind?
So what is on my mind is something we talked about briefly, I think in the fall before the presidential election, and that is the deficit. I don't understand why voters, legislators, and presidents basically don't care about the deficit. And to me, it's one of the biggest threats to our economy and our culture and the whole well-being of our country. It historically, I'm not saying we never had a deficit. We've always had deficits, but they were controlled. Basically, from the 1990s or 1980s until 2001, the deficit became an issue, right? And politicians would talk about it, and we had a handful of deficit reduction acts. We had a combination of budget cuts and tax increases and blah, blah, blah. But beginning in since 2001, basically the deficit is out of control. It almost doubled in 1 year this year. It's not something that you can blame Republicans or Democrats for. It's happened under both parties. And economists, from liberal economists, conservative economists, banks, government offices, they all have these dire warnings about what is going to happen if we don't do something about the deficit, if things just go on the way they are. And they don't pay any attention. And basically, it's become a big it's not a problem anymore. It's like a political weapon. And so, the reality is that none of the things that politicians talk about, none of this stuff that Trump is doing, all this grandstanding, eliminating offices, blah, blah, blah. None of those are big enough to solve the issue. Basically the culprits are Social Security, Medicare, and our taxes are across the board really too low. Now, I'm not a proponent of high taxes, but in this case, we're threatening the future of our country, our children, our grandchildren, their children. And I'm just curious, I have lots of facts and figures about it. The point is, it accounts for over 90% of what we spend our money on at this point. And if we cut every government program, if things keep going the way they go, if we cut everything, and interest rates keep rising, we would just be able to pay the interest. Like, we're not even paying any of our debt. All we're paying is interest. And so I'm curious, you and Patty, what do you think? Do you think it's not an issue? Do you think that, that's old-fashioned thinking, too conservative? And what do you think it will take to solve the problem?
I think something that would look something like a revolution. We are now paying more interest on our debt than any other item on the federal budget. But Patty, what do you think?
I agree with Susan. It seems the only time either political party makes the deficit an issue is when they're not in power.
Right.
Right now the Democrats are blaming the Republicans, and when when the Democrats were in power, oh my gosh, the deficit is the biggest issue. But we get
Good
into
point.
and it's a joke. And like you said, what they're attacking is not going to ease the deficit problem. All of the hoopla about USAID, the entire organization, it's something like 1%.
1%. Yep.
And closing the whole thing is going to have such a detrimental effect on our standing in other countries and to the health. These are soft targets that we're looking at, that we're building goodwill with those countries. It's nothing, to say nothing about the humanitarian aid. Granted, there are parts of it that are useless, but you should use more of a surgical carving rather than throw the whole thing out. And the fact that it's not going to do anything, it seems like the only hopes of the entire Doge committee is to just make sure that we eliminate enough money so that Trump can cut taxes again and push through that bill, which is going to do nothing for the deficit.
It's actually bad. Like I said, I hate to say it, but taxes are too low on everybody. And, one of the areas that needs fixed is middle class taxes. And of course, no politician and no voter is going to vote. So the one article I read, it's like, who's to blame for this? It was voters, because we keep voting for Santa Claus candidates, and people just vote with their own interests in mind.
Is that what
I agree with you.
Pardon me?
Is that what a Santa Claus candidate is?
Yeah, Santa Claus candidate says, I'm going to give you something. I'm going to lower your taxes. I'm going to, something that's just going to help you. Yeah.
Well, I think that 50% of the population doesn't pay any taxes at all.
Right.
And there was complained that the upper 50 don't pay any taxes, but they do. They pay all of them.
Well, some of that 50, in all fairness, that some of that 50% that you're talking about are people that are making so little money that if they had to pay out taxes, they wouldn't be able to survive.
Some of them, but all of them?
I would say most of them, yeah.
Some of them.
Half the country.
The ones that are not paying taxes are some of the multimillionaires and corporations that pay no taxes at all. Yeah, those are the ones.
So one of the solutions is to drastically reconfigure Social Security and quit grandfathering people in. One of the things, they didn't want to come out and say it, but you could read between the lines, that I think there are people that think that once our generation, the baby boomers, die, that all this spending on Social Security and Medicare will drop. But the problem is there's a generation, our kids, so our grandchildren, that generation is as big as the baby boomers. So it might help for 10 years or something, but maybe not even that long. But it's not the solution to just wait till baby boomers die. You have, and they always say that, people don't get any more out of Social Security than they pay in, and that's not true. That isn't true. Most of the borrowing is to pay for the shortfalls in Social Security.
Wow.
And I think when is it projected to run out of money now?
Every year they say it's going to run out of money, because technically every year there's not enough, because there's not a lockbox. They just take money out of the general fund to fund it, but they finance that. They borrow that money. Right. I guess my topic maybe should have been Social Security.
I know that I have already received more money in Social Security than I ever put into it. When I started paying Social Security, God, it was almost nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, well, the thing is, they knew when we were in college that that this was going to happen. They knew that there'd be more people retired and old than there are young and working, and they knew that the level of contribution was not enough. But it was, you know, it's too long term. Someone who's only in office for 2 years, what are they going to do about it? Someone who's only in office for 4 years, they're just like, just let me get through the next 2 years without some calamity, right?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we've got a leadership problem in this country. Everybody is concerned about only the next election.
Only the next election. Yep.
Yeah, and I don't know what the solution to that is. What do you think? I mean, what happens when our we can't borrow any more money?
Well, or when we can't pay the interest. That's what would happen. If we can't pay the interest, then people will quit buying the treasury bonds, obviously. And then we'll have to cut everything and people will go nuts. There will be it's happened in Greece, you know, where they had to cut a lot of their public, you know, assistance programs. They have riots. And we know this country is capable of rioting.
Well, you know, when we look back in history before Social Security came into play, and what happened at that time, and as people grew, well, number one, the longevity of people was not as great, so people did not live as long after being required to stay for. Plus, they were usually taken care of by their spouse, by their children, so family, they moved back in with the family. That's not occurring anymore.
The parents are taking care of their children.
Yeah.
And we are living much longer, to the point that, you know, which is, you know, why they've discussed, you know, as one of the compromises is it, you know, increasing the age limit to obtain Social Security.
Yeah.
And you raise it by 4 months and it causes a riot.
Right.
And I think you have to look at that logically. I am fearful that it goes away, because I think that you do need this type of protection for people. I mean, you know, again, just look back in history and what happened to some people when there was nothing for them, or when they were unable to work anymore for whatever reason. So we have to have some sort of, you know, safety net for those people.
We do need a safety net, but I just think, I mean, I may use our you know, ourselves, my husband and I, as an example. I mean, I'm not saying we don't, I mean, yes, I will say it. We don't need Social Security. We could live the way we're living if we didn't have, I don't get it. My husband gets it. But we would certainly be okay.
Yeah.
Well,
you know what I mean?
People like that. Yeah.
And still it's paid to everybody though. So
and you know, I would be willing to get less if I gave less, or if I could give it to something local as opposed to I mean, think of how much it costs to administer Social Security.
Yeah.
Just think about it.
You know, everything is going to get worse when you just look at the high school dropout rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're creating a whole generation of poor people. Patty, I hope this wasn't your topic.
No, you know, I'll be honest with you. When you gave us this as our role for this week, I had a heck of a lot of difficulty. Since Trump's inauguration, you know, as the lifelong Democrat that I am, I have, I think I'm spiraling on all of the things that have gone on, you know, whether it's the tariffs against Canada and Mexico, whether it's we're going to take over Greenland, we're going to make Canada our 51st state, and forget about Puerto Rico, by the way, you still don't belong in there. we're going to take over the Panama Canal because we're not doing well. The European Union is going to get tariffs, but we don't want to. Of course, we don't want to go after Russia or North Korea because they are our enemies. But they have dictators, so let's follow that. The influence of Elon Musk, an unelected person who is making all the cuts that we were talking about, but they seem to be problematic in my mind, that he is making. The weapon is, I've heard for 4 years about the weaponization of the Justice Department and of the FBI. And what do we have? We have people going in there, then their first line of duty is to go after the people that actually ran the investigations of January 6th. And that's being done now because 1,500, 1,600 criminals who were convicted and placed in jail for the January 6th uprising are pardoned by President Trump. And so what do you do now? You go back and you investigate the people that investigated the criminals and put them in jail because heaven only knows they shouldn't be in jail. And of course, then you should take some of those J6, and I will not call them patriots as the president does, and you put them as part of your administration, which to me seems to be comical. So I decided that my topic would be partisanship, and the effect that partisanship has had in this country, to the point that we are so ununified, that we are so dug in on our political views that we can't even sit down and have a nice conversation with someone from the other party. Now, I'd like to think that this forum allows us to do that, and in a civil tone, and that's the whole purpose of this forum. But boy, this is unusual to see something of this sort. I came to this when I was watching the Senate hearings for confirmation of the cabinet members that Trump has asked for. Now, we had talked about this earlier in a previous program, and I really think that some of the cabinet, there's really none of them that I agree with politically all the way down the line, but there are many of them that I thought were reasonable choices. They were qualified, and in some cases, very good choices for the position. And when that's the case, they should be placed into that position. But then there were some that were just so out there. And watching the hearings, it's become a point where both political parties have dug their heels in, and they're not even listening to anything that's being said. They tend to not question any thoughts or theories. You sit there and you listen to these candidates for these positions lie through their teeth and say whatever they think it's going to take in order to make that position. And because there's no reason for them to tell the truth, they don't have to worry because the party in power is going to put them into place no matter what. Kash Patel's was probably the one that angered me the most, because he kept saying things that were blatantly untrue, that were backed up by things that he published in his book, like his saying that he didn't have a list of people to go after when he goes into the FBI and takes it over. And he has an enemies list. He published it in his book. And for him to say he doesn't have an enemies list is an out and out lie. And the fact that it didn't make any difference, because those senators on those committees, even though they have the right to advise and consent, were going to vote based upon their party and based upon their party only. I almost wish that the committees that do the approving of these candidates were equal in number. Now, I know that would be a log jam. They'd make nothing done, but at least you would have to try to convince the other side, and somebody would have to blink in order to get the cabinet members chosen. The way it is done with the majority party having more members than the minority party, it doesn't seem to be working. And especially in a case when members of the Senate and members of this committees are totally ignoring their duty to advise and consent.
Yeah.
And, one of the complaints I've heard is that it's taking too long. Well, I went back and looked up how long it took for Biden to get his cabinet approved. And most of them didn't come in until March. This is the beginning of February. So this whining about what the big bad Democrats are doing to oppose the Republican candidates, that's crocodile tears.
Were there any nominees for any of these positions that you agreed with?
Yes, but not their political views, but I felt they were qualified.
Yeah. What do you think of Pam Bondi?
Well, she is one example. Now, I have serious problems with Pam Bondi. When she was originally, before she became, what was she, Secretary, Attorney General, wasn't she, in Florida?
In Florida, yeah.
Before that, she had originally kind of made her name known. She had a lawsuit that she was pushing against Trump in Florida. And then he came in and gave a huge donation to her reelection in the position that she was in. And all of a sudden, the whole issue with Trump became moot and it was gone.
I didn't know
I had
that.
some questions. Now, whether that's what happened or not, that's what I saw. And I thought, well, watch her. I have concerns, though, with her. I know she was very adamant, excuse me, in the hearings that she would not go after those people that in the FBI that investigated Trump. I mean, against any part of the judiciary that went against Trump. She said, I'm not looking forward. I do not have an enemies list. And I thought that's great. Then her first thing she said yesterday was an issue to go back and check on those things and set up an investigation of Trump. Of the members of the judiciary that tried to convict him of various crimes. So I have concerns. All that being said, was she qualified? Yes, she was qualified for the job. And for that reason, I agree that she should be confirmed.
Oh,
so even with, I know it was a long walk to get there. But my point is, she is qualified for that position. And for that reason, I think she should achieve the position. Unfortunately, some of these candidates are not qualified in any way, shape, or form.
I was surprised by a lot of them, really. In fact, when I first saw Pam Bondi on the news, I thought, well, Trump, there he goes again, picking good-looking women. And it appears as though to him the way a woman looks is a huge qualifier for a position. I mean, look at the press secretary. But anyway, I was impressed then with the hearings, and there's an awful lot to that lady.
Yeah, and, I agree. She impressed me at the hearings. I'm not sure she's going to follow through with it, but she is qualified. I looked though at a Pete Hegseth, who has no business being, attorney, Secretary of Defense.
Secretary at Defense.
Kash Patel is the head of the FBI. Has
he been voted yet?
No, he hasn't been. Robert but he got through. No, I take that back. I'm not sure he's even been voted on in the committee yet. Robert F. Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard were pushed through committee. Robert F. Kennedy is another one that I think is totally unqualified for that position. So these are some scary things.
Well, Susan, what do you think about what your fellow panelists had to say?
Well, the one thing you forgot about Trump was he also announced he wants to take over the Gaza Strip and turn it into a
tourist. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Turn it into a tourist destination. Who cares about the Palestinians that live there? But we're going to take it over temporarily and fix it, right? So
because he did such a good job in New Jersey, in Atlantic City, building,
right. Yeah. So, okay. I agree that he's outrageous. And, what he signed 800 executive orders or something like that. What I get tired of, and I hear it from my friends too, I get tired of the real, apparently sincere belief that we've never had this bad of a president, that nothing like this has ever happened to our country. And, we have had a lot of outrageous, unqualified, unethical presidents. Now, he is all of them, probably, but whatever, what he's saying, though, a lot of nice people agree with. And I do think we've gotten to the point where
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.
This morning that 40,000 of them have taken that buyout. And I think Saturday's the deadline. I don't care how many of those you get rid of. You still have this giant thing called the federal government that is not going to get dismantled. People, I just think you give him too much credit. He doesn't have that much power. Now, the thing that worries me is our legislators, because they don't care. They seem to, they took an oath to the Constitution. And I know I've talked about this before, Liz Cheney's book. Her point is we have so many legislators that are more loyal to their party and just getting elected. They're not, they don't even understand their oath. They don't even know that they took an oath to the Constitution. They don't know what that means. And so they are led along like, puppies on a leash. And if I have a treat for you, if I give you a committee assignment, if I let you, put your name on a bill, something you could go back and make crazy overstated claims to the voters about what you did. If I help you get reelected, you do this, this, and that. And they do. And they all do it. They all
I
do
agree.
It. It's ridiculous.
Totally.
They are. I used to say 20 years ago when I was teaching and I was trying to keep my students awake, I would say, I think it's a good thing when Congress can't get anything done. Because that means that they're not writing any more stupid laws and they're not spending money and they're, so fine if they can't. Because, like in the 90s, we complained about Congress not doing anything. But it's an all-time low now. It's an all-time low. And it's like politics have become the ends, not the means to an end.
I'm
It-
sorry,
it is-
panelists, but your time is up.
Okay.
Goodbye, folks.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.